Hey man, there's a strange silence that unsettles her more than shouting ever could. At first, when you stop reacting, she tells herself you're just sulking, that you'll be back once the storm inside you passes. But days go by, then weeks, and your calm doesn't break. She doesn't hear the familiar tone of defense in your voice, doesn't see the flash of pain in your eyes, doesn't feel the usual tug of reassurance she could once summon with a single text. What she feels now is unease, not guilt, not sadness, but a quiet panic disguised as composure. Because your lack of reaction removes the mirror she used to measure her power. Without your emotional feedback, she can't tell whether she still matters, whether she still exists in the space she once dominated. And that uncertainty eats at her, quietly, constantly, like static humming behind everything she does. She used to know how to pull your strings. A sigh, a look, a withdrawal of warmth, all of it could ignite you instantly. But now her tricks fall flat. She throws hints, creates small conflicts, even tries indifference of her own, hoping to spark a familiar fire in you. Yet nothing. Your silence isn't cold, it's detached, unbothered, steady. That steadiness terrifies her. It reminds her of something she forgot. You have the capacity to live without her chaos. In every calm reply, every delay in response, every moment you choose peace instead of argument, she feels her influence shrink. It's not just your words that are missing, it's your emotional availability, the attention that once fed her sense of significance. She's beginning to sense that she's lost not just your affection, but her control over the rhythm of your emotions. In the beginning, she frames your calm as arrogance. He's acting like he doesn't care, she tells herself, trying to weaponize dismissal against the discomfort growing inside her. But inside that narrative, cracks appear fast. Because when you genuinely don't react, there's no visible resentment for her to attack, no wounded pride to comfort. The absence of conflict feels like exile, an emotional isolation where she no longer has a role. The silence exposes what words once concealed, that her validation was your weakness, and now that weakness is gone. She feels the distance like cold air rushing into a room that used to be warm. She's realizing that your indifference is not a phase, it's evolution. You're not angry, you're healed. And that's something she doesn't know how to fight. As days stretch, the silence becomes louder than any argument you ever had. It follows her into every corner of her routine. She'll catch herself drafting messages she never sends, replaying conversations where she might have pushed too far, wondering if the indifference she once demanded has now become permanent. What hurts her most isn't rejection, it's replacement. Not that you found someone else, but that piece has replaced her. She senses it when she sees you unfazed by her subtle tests, when your tone stays even while hers rises, when you smile without the faintest hint of tension. That smile feels like betrayal because it means you no longer derive your stability from her. You've reclaimed your emotional center, and now her presence feels unnecessary, a realization that bruises her ego more deeply than any breakup could. Eventually, curiosity replaces confidence. She begins to wonder what changed inside you. Did someone teach you this restraint? Did you meet someone who showed you what composure looks like? The questions swirl because she cannot comprehend a version of you that doesn't revolve around her. She rereads old messages where you used to pour emotion into every word and compares them to your short, composed replies now. That comparison haunts her. It reveals something she never expected. You were capable of control all along. You simply chose not to use it with her. And that realization flips the dynamic completely. She's no longer the center of your reactions. She's a spectator to your transformation, and that to her feels like punishment. Because what she's watching is not vengeance or withdrawal, it's liberation. She starts testing you again, but this time with subtle precision, delayed replies, random coldness, strategic disappearances. In the past, these small games would have triggered a storm inside you, confusion, anxiety, overthinking. But now, you don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't even acknowledge the storm she's trying to summon. You just remain still, and that stillness unnerves her more than any display of emotion ever could. Because what she's beginning to see is that you've detached, not out of anger, but out of awareness. You've finally understood the mechanism behind her games, how every push and pull was designed to create dependence. And now that you've stopped reacting, that mechanism has collapsed. She can no longer feed on your confusion, no longer inflate her ego through your pursuit. It's like pulling the strings of a puppet that no longer moves. She feels powerless, invisible, irrelevant. In her quiet moments, she starts reflecting, but not in the way you might think. She doesn't feel guilt immediately. She feels loss of power. There's a difference. Guilt requires awareness, humility, but what she feels first is panic. Panic that the emotional leash she once held has snapped. You're not checking her stories, you're not liking her posts, you're not orbiting her world anymore. That digital silence mirrors your emotional distance, and it hits harder than any insult, because now she's not just unseen, she's unimportant. For someone whose self-worth thrived on attention, this new invisibility is torture. Every time she opens her phone and sees nothing from you, the quiet screams louder. It tells her that she's lost something she thought she controlled, your emotional investment. And when that's gone, she's left staring into the hollow reflection of her own need for validation. This is when the confusion sets in. She begins to reinterpret the past, rewriting the narrative in her head to protect her ego. He must be seeing someone else, she tells herself, trying to justify your silence through fantasy rather than facing the truth. You've simply stopped caring. The idea that you might have outgrown her hurts more than the idea of you replacing her, because replacement means competition, and she could fight that. But outgrowing? That's irreversible. It implies evolution, something she can't undo, something she can't reach. You've stepped into a different level of self-control, one where her emotions no longer have authority. And for a woman used to emotional dominance, that realization is devastating. You've become unpredictable, and nothing shakes a manipulative person more than losing predictability in their target. She tries one last tactic, nostalgia. She'll bring up old memories, moments when things were easy, when you were emotionally open, vulnerable, expressive. She does this not to reconnect, but to probe, to see if any part of the old you still lingers beneath that calm exterior. But the difference is glaring. The same words that once melted you now mean nothing. You've outgrown the emotional language she once used to disarm you. You hear her talk about how good things used to be, but it sounds distant, hollow, almost manipulative, because you now see the pattern. Those moments were never about love, they were about control through sentiment, and you're done being controlled. You respond with patience, with kindness even, but without emotional submission. That composure burns her from the inside out because it shows that you no longer need her to feel grounded, seen, or desired. Eventually, she stops reaching out, but don't mistake that for peace. It's retreat. It's the silence of someone licking their wounds, trying to regain footing after losing the upper hand. She may act indifferent online, post as if she's living her best life, laugh in group chats, but beneath that performance lies disorientation, because your silence did something her games never expected. It forced her to confront herself. And that's the one confrontation she's never prepared for. Every man before you reacted. Every man before you broke the silence. But you didn't. You stood tall in the emptiness, let it echo, and found strength in it. That's when she realized something most women never admit. When a man no longer reacts, he becomes untouchable. And the one who once thought she had power is now the one haunted by your peace. Time begins to stretch differently for her now. What used to feel like victory, the idea of making you chase, making you react, now feels hollow, because no reaction means no reassurance that she still matters. Every time she opens her phone and resists the urge to message you, she feels that inner pull tighten. The irony is painful. She wanted to feel desired, but now she's the one craving your attention. She keeps imagining your face, not angry, not desperate, just peaceful. And it drives her crazy. That peace symbolizes something she's never achieved: emotional independence. The more she thinks about it, the more she starts to realize that you were never weak for caring. You were strong for trying. And now, your silence feels like an indictment, proof that she pushed away the only man who truly saw her, and did it in pursuit of power she never needed in the first place. This is when the internal war begins. She tells herself she's fine, that she's moved on, that what you had wasn't that deep. But late at night, when the noise fades and the distractions disappear, the truth shows up uninvited. That truth whispers that she lost a man who would have done anything for her, and not because he was weak, but because he loved with depth. Your silence has made her realize that love and attention aren't the same. You loved her even when it cost you peace. She only gave attention when it fed her ego. And that contrast now burns in her chest like acid. Because once a woman recognizes the difference between a man who chases her and a man who centered her, it's too late. You've become the ghost that visits her in quiet moments, not to haunt, but to remind her of the man she couldn't emotionally handle. She'll start to mimic your silence, thinking it will hurt you back. She'll mirror your indifference, try to outlast your calm. But here's the truth. You're no longer playing the same game. What she doesn't realize is that your silence isn't a tactic, it's transformation. You're not waiting for her reaction. You're not holding your breath for her text. You're not hoping she misses you. You've genuinely detached. And that difference is everything. Her silence is a mask. Yours is peace. Hers is strategy. Yours is healing. And as she tries to win by ignoring you, she slowly realizes she's only isolating herself further. Because while she's pretending not to care, you're actually moving on. And when a man reaches that level of peace, when his emotions no longer orbit a woman's attention, he becomes the kind of man she'll never be able to forget. Weeks turn into months, and she starts seeing pieces of you everywhere. In songs, in strangers, in passing conversations. She doesn't admit it, but she's looking for you in other people, and finding no one like you. Every new connection feels dull, transactional, predictable, because after experiencing a man who cared deeply and yet learned to walk away silently, every other man feels emotionally shallow. You've set a standard without even trying to. That's the paradox. The less you react, the more powerful your presence becomes. You're not haunting her because you're trying to. You're haunting her because you represent something she can't recreate: stability. And while she might date, flirt, or post happy pictures, every moment of quiet that follows reminds her that peace doesn't feel the same when it's empty. You left her with silence, but in that silence, she hears the echo of your worth, and then it hits her, not as a sharp realization, but as a slow, painful truth that grows heavier over time. She pushed away the calm she always said she wanted. She used to say she wanted a man who wouldn't yell, who would handle things maturely, who would stay grounded through the storm. But when she finally met that man, she mistook his peace for weakness. Now, she sees what she lost. Your silence isn't punishment, it's reflection. It shows her the contrast between what she thought she wanted and what she was actually prepared to handle. Because deep down, most women don't know how to sit with a man's silence. It exposes too much of their own noise. And when that noise is all she has left, her thoughts, her regrets, her guilt, she begins to understand that your lack of reaction was never about indifference. It was about reclaiming your peace. And that realization, right there, is what finally breaks her. Something strange starts happening to her now. She begins remembering only the best parts of you. Her mind edits the story, erasing the arguments, the flaws, the moments when she took you for granted. What remains are the snapshots that hurt to recall, the warmth in your eyes when you looked at it, a way your presence used to calm her, the steadiness you carried, even when she was falling apart. But here's the twist. She's no longer remembering those moments with affection, but with grief. Your silence has turned those memories into reminders of everything she destroyed with her own behavior. She realizes that the man who once responded to her every mood, who tried to meet her emotional storms with understanding, doesn't exist for her anymore. He's gone. Not dead, not angry, just unreachable. That to her is the cruelest kind of loss, because when you stop reacting, she doesn't lose your attention. She loses the version of herself that existed in your eyes. She'll start trying to replace you, thinking she can outpace the ache by distracting herself. But every new man she meets exposes what she lost even more, because she'll find the same pattern repeating. She'll test them, they'll chase, they'll crumble, and she'll feel that same fleeting sense of control, only to end up empty again. None of them match your restraint, your silence, your discipline. None of them have the quiet strength you developed when you chose not to react. Every man she meets will either overgive or undercare, and she'll start to crave the balance you once offered, that rare mix of intensity and composure. But that craving will never be satisfied again, because what she truly misses isn't your attention, it's your energy. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't bargain, doesn't break. She'll realize too late that she mistook that energy for passivity, when in truth, it was power. Your silence has now become her mirror, and every reflection she sees in it is uncomfortable. It forces her to face her immaturity, her need for control, her addiction to chaos. Before, she could blame your words, twist your tone, manipulate your reactions, but silence offers no material to twist. It's pure, it's unforgiving. It reflects everything exactly as it is. When she looks into it, she doesn't see a villain. She sees herself, impulsive, careless, ungrateful. And that's what begins to eat away at her. She starts to realize that your silence was never passive. It was a message: I won't argue to prove my worth. It was the moment you chose dignity over attention, self-respect over validation. And for the first time, she understands what it truly means for a man to walk away emotionally before he physically does. Because when a man stops reacting, he's already halfway gone. It's in that emptiness, the one your silence left, that she finally starts to grow. Not because she wants to, but because she has to. The absence of your reaction forces her to rely on herself for the validation she used to extract from you. For the first time, she has to face her own insecurity without the comfort of your reassurance. And as painful as it is for her, it's also the most transformative thing that could happen. She begins to see that the problem was never your calmness. It was her inability to sit in stillness without creating chaos. She starts recognizing how she mistook attention for affection, reaction for relevance. And though she'll never admit it out loud, she silently thanks you, because your silence became the boundary she could never set for herself. Through your lack of reaction, you didn't destroy her. You taught her what accountability feels like. By now, your silence has become legendary in her mind. It's no longer something she's angry about. It's something she respects, even if she won't say it, because she's met others since you. Men who talk too much, explain too much, chase too quickly, and it only makes her miss your restraint more. That calmness she once mocked now feels magnetic. She realizes that your silence wasn't indifference, it was emotional mastery. The kind of power that comes from knowing that you don't need to control anyone's perception to prove your worth. She's beginning to understand that silence in the hands of a man who's done chasing validation is louder than any words could ever be. And even though she'll never tell you, your lack of reaction became the standard she now holds every man against. You didn't win by convincing her of your value, you won by walking away with it intact. At this stage, something irreversible begins to happen. Your silence starts living in her mind rent-free. She won't say it out loud, but you've become the invisible benchmark for every man that comes after you. No matter how much she tries to move on, there's always that silent comparison playing in the background. When a new guy responds too quickly, she misses your patience. When he over-explains himself, she misses your mystery. When he argues, she misses your calm. You've become the standard, not because you tried to, but because your silence left space for her imagination to fill in the blanks. That's the hidden power of detachment. It lets her project what she wishes you were, not just what you were. And over time, that imagined version of you becomes larger, cleaner, and more ideal than the real thing ever was. That's why silence wins, because her mind never stops trying to make sense of what it lost. She starts thinking about moments that didn't seem important back then, the small details she overlooked, the way you used to listen without interrupting, the quiet way you handled her overreactions, the times you forgave things she never apologized for. She replays those moments not to feel nostalgia, but to understand what kind of man behaves like that, and why she couldn't see his worth when it mattered. The answer hurts her because she wasn't ready for maturity. She was addicted to emotional highs, to the validation that came from being chased. But your silence stripped her of that. It made her realize that real attraction isn't built on excitement, it's built on equilibrium. That lesson comes too late for her, and that's why she can't escape it. The more she understands what you represented, the harder it becomes to fill that void, because you weren't just a man, you were an energy, and she's now realizing that not every man carries it. You'll notice that even her social media starts to shift. The captions that once dripped with confidence start to sound reflective. The photos feel a little more forced. She'll post quotes about healing or peace, not realizing that the person who taught her what peace looks like was you. She'll pretend she's thriving, but the truth is, she's trying to recreate the emotional stability that your silence forced her to confront. That's the paradox. She's now chasing the calm she used to resent you for having. The same calm she once called boring, or detached is now the thing she craves most. Because when a woman realizes that constant excitement is just disguised chaos, she starts to long for what she once took for granted, a man who made her feel safe even in stillness. And the more she tries to find that energy elsewhere, the more she realizes that silence, in the right man, is love disguised as discipline. As time passes, she might reach out, not directly but through small gestures, a like on an old photo, a random story reply, a song shared out of nowhere. She'll act like it's casual, but it's not. It's her way of testing the waters, seeing if the man who once reacted to everything still exists. And when you stay silent, when you don't take the bait, when you continue moving with that same calm certainty, it hits her all over again. She's not being ignored by a man playing games. She's being overlooked by a man who's done playing them. That realization cuts deeper than any breakup text ever could. Because silence doesn't just end a chapter, it closes the book. It communicates what words never can, that you've outgrown not just her, but the version of yourself that ever needed her approval. And that truth, no matter how much she hides it, keeps her up at night. Eventually, she'll understand, not in a flash of clarity, but through slow, quiet acceptance, that your silence was never about punishment, it was about peace. You didn't withhold your attention to make her chase you. You simply realized that your energy was too valuable to waste on convincing someone of your worth. That's the moment most women never see coming, when a man learns to replace reaction with reflection, when he stops trying to win arguments and starts winning himself back. That shift changes everything. You didn't need revenge, validation, or closure. Your silence gave you all three, and by the time she finally understands what it meant, it's far too late. Because you've moved on to a life where your emotions serve you, not enslave you. You became the man she didn't believe existed, and now she'll spend years meeting men who remind her of everything you were, but never are you. That's the legacy of silence. It doesn't destroy her, it teaches her what she could have had, and what she'll never touch again. What begins as regret soon transforms into fixation. She doesn't just miss you anymore, she obsesses over understanding you. She replays your last words, analyzes your tone, and studies your every silence like a riddle that refuses to be solved. She wonders how you detach so effortlessly when she can't stop thinking about you. That mystery, the one she once mocked you for, now becomes the very thing that defines her fascination. Because deep down, she knows she never broke you. She only revealed how unbreakable you really were. And that realization doesn't just sting, it reshapes her. You've become the paradox. She can't explain to herself, a man who cared deeply but never begged, who felt everything but never folded, who loved but still walked away. Every time she tries to hate you, she ends up respecting you more. That's the punishment she gave herself without knowing it. In her new relationships, your ghost shows up without warning. When another man overreacts, she's reminded of how calmly you would have handled it. When a man tries too hard to please her, she misses how you made her earn your attention. She won't say it out loud, but she'll feel it. How every man now seems slightly smaller in your shadow. Because once a woman has experienced a man who is emotionally grounded, she can never fully return to chaos. You ruined her tolerance for games. Your silence became the measure of emotional strength. And now, every man who flinches, argues, or overshares makes her crave that quiet control again. You didn't just leave her behind, you redefined what strength looks like in her eyes, and that's the kind of impact no words can undo. Meanwhile, your life starts moving forward, quietly but steadily. The peace that once felt empty now feels full. You begin to notice how much energy you wasted explaining yourself to people who only wanted to misunderstand you. You start to enjoy the simplicity of being unbothered, the weightlessness of detachment, and it's not about revenge, it's about growth. You realize that silence is not weakness, it's clarity. It's the language of men who have outgrown emotional chaos. Every time she crosses your mind, it's not with bitterness but with distance, like remembering a storm you once survived. You no longer need her validation, her apology, or her closure. You've become what every man secretly hopes to be, someone whose peace cannot be shaken by a woman's confusion. That's when silence evolves from a tactic into a way of life. But for her, the silence never truly ends. It echoes in her mind long after you're gone. Every quiet moment reminds her of what she lost, not your presence, but your steadiness. She'll see you in fragments, in the calm eyes of a stranger, in a quote that hits too close to home, in a song that once belonged to both of you, but she'll never experience you again, because what she didn't understand then, she understands now. Your silence wasn't the absence of love. It was the final act of self-respect. It was you saying, without saying, I choose peace over potential. And that kind of choice doesn't come from pride. It comes from evolution. She'll spend years trying to become the woman who could have matched that version of you, but she'll never get the chance. You were the test, and she failed it when she mistook your composure for indifference. Eventually, she'll tell people that losing you changed her, but she'll leave out the truth that it was your silence that did it. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of everything a woman needs to hear when she's finally ready to listen. It speaks of boundaries, of dignity, of lessons learned the hard way. It tells her that real love doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't plead for understanding. It simply walks away when it's no longer respected. And while she may heal, date again, even smile again, a part of her will always carry the sound of your silence. It will live in her memory not as cruelty, but as consequence. Because the quietest goodbye often becomes the loudest echo in the heart of the one who took too long to understand. You didn't hurt her by walking away. You taught her what it means to lose a man who finally realized his worth. As months turn into years, the dynamic between your silence and her regret becomes something far deeper than either of you ever expected. For her, it no longer feels like a simple mistake. It feels like a haunting. Every man she meets carries fragments of what you were, but none carry your energy. She can't articulate it, but what she's missing isn't love, it's gravity. That rare presence that made her feel both safe and challenged. Your silence took that away, and now she realizes it wasn't your words that gave her comfort, it was your steadiness. When she scrolls through your photos, sees your life moving on without her, there's no anger anymore. There's just that cold, heavy recognition that she became the noise you learned to escape, that you loved her enough to stay calm through the storm, and respected yourself enough to never return to it. That realization doesn't just hurt her, it humbles her. In the quiet corners of her mind, she begins to replay not what you said, but what you didn't. The moments where you chose to stay calm when she provoked you. The times you looked at her with disappointment instead of rage. The days you let her words slide off your back instead of defending yourself. At the time, she thought your silence meant defeat. Now, she understands it was control. You weren't running out of things to say. You were running out of reasons to explain yourself to someone who had already decided not to listen. That understanding eats away at her pride, because it exposes something brutal. You were never powerless. She was just too blind to see how much power restraint holds. It's only now, looking back, that she realizes silence is not emptiness. It's dominance without aggression, truth without argument, love without desperation. She starts to understand that you were never trying to win her back. You were winning yourself back. And that's the difference between men who stay stuck and men who evolve. You stopped measuring your worth by how much love you could give and started measuring it by how much peace you could keep. You didn't choose silence to manipulate her emotions. You chose it because you finally understood that nothing you say can convince someone who thrives on misunderstanding you. And as she sees that truth, she starts to crumble under the weight of her own behavior. She finally realizes that she wasn't competing with other women. She was competing with the version of herself you outgrew. That's what hurts her the most. Not that you stopped loving her, but that you became someone her chaos no longer had access to. By now, your silence has done something words never could. It's rewritten the entire narrative. You're no longer the man she left behind. You're the man she wishes she had treated differently. Every new argument she has with someone else becomes a mirror reflecting how unfair she was with you. Every time another man raises his voice, she remembers how you never did. Every time someone storms out, she recalls how you stayed calm. And though she might try to numb that ache with distractions, it always finds her in the end. Because once a woman realizes she broke something that was meant to last, no amount of validation from others can replace the respect she lost for herself. That's the silent irony. She taught you how to be quiet, but your silence taught her what real loss feels like. And for you, that silence has become something sacred. It's no longer a defense mechanism, it's a boundary. You've learned that peace isn't something you find, it's something you protect. You understand now that a man's strength isn't shown in how loudly he argues, but in how little he needs to. You've outgrown the version of yourself that thought love had to be proven through sacrifice. You now realize that real love doesn't demand the destruction of your self-respect. You've seen what happens when emotion turns into submission, and you've chosen clarity instead. And perhaps the greatest lesson in all of it is this: silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you finally learned that not every storm deserves your thunder. Sometimes the strongest move a man can make is to say nothing and let the silence show her everything. As more time passes, you begin to understand that silence isn't just something you practiced in that one relationship. It's become the foundation of how you now live your life. It's no longer just about not reacting to her, it's about not reacting to the world. You start to notice how often people try to bait others into emotional chaos, how many thrive on the energy of argument and validation, but you've seen through it now. You understand that reaction is currency and silence is wealth. When you stay calm, you rob manipulative people of their leverage. You no longer need to prove a point, defend your name, or explain your worth. You've already lived through the lesson that taught you everything. The moment you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you gain back your freedom. And that freedom doesn't come with noise, it comes with quiet certainty. Meanwhile, she still carries a quiet ache she can't articulate. Her world keeps moving forward, new faces, new conversations, but there's always something missing in the background, something she can't quite describe. It's that absence of your energy, the kind of presence that demanded nothing yet changed everything. You've become a reference point, a blueprint of stability she didn't know she needed until it was gone. When her new relationships hit turbulence, she catches herself thinking, he would have handled this differently. When someone loses composure, she remembers your restraint. But the most painful memory isn't what you said, it's how much peace you had while saying nothing. Because in a world where everyone's screaming to be understood, your quiet understanding became unforgettable. She realizes too late that men like you don't come back. They move on, silently, powerfully, permanently. You notice though that your silence has changed the way you love too. You don't chase anymore, not because you're bitter, but because you've learned to recognize peace as the truest form of connection. You're not drawn to women who confuse chaos for chemistry. You no longer mistake attention for affection. You can sit in someone's silence now and feel at home, not threatened. You understand that real intimacy doesn't require noise, it requires presence. And that's what your experience taught you. Love doesn't die in silence, it's revealed by it. The right person won't feel threatened by your calm, they'll feel safe in it. And when you finally meet that kind of woman, you'll recognize her instantly, not by what she says, but by what she doesn't demand from you. Because you've lived through the kind who needed constant reaction, and now you only value those who understand peace. But make no mistake, your silence didn't just change how you love, it changed how you lead. It taught you the art of emotional control, the power of patience, and the depth of stillness. You no longer get pulled into petty fights or pointless conversations. You've learned that when people try to provoke you, they're really trying to confirm that they still have power over you. But silence refuses them, that satisfaction. You've become untouchable, not because you're detached, but because you're disciplined. You've learned to pause where others react, to think where others explode. That pause has become your strength. It's not about ego, it's about strategy. Because in a world where everyone's reacting, the one who stays silent controls the pace. And in relationships, in business, in life, control over your emotions is control over your destiny. For her, however, that silence becomes the lifelong reminder that she lost a man who mastered what most never do: self-control. Every time she sees your name, hears your story, or crosses paths with something that reminds her of you, it's no longer about romance, it's about respect. The respect she couldn't give you when it mattered most. She'll try to convince herself that she's moved on, that the pain has faded, but deep down she knows that your silence is eternal. Because silence doesn't fade, it lingers. It lives in the spaces between what was said and what never needed to be. It's in that quiet understanding that she finally accepts what she couldn't before. You didn't abandon her, you outgrew her. You didn't withdraw your love, you redirected it inward, and that's why your silence hurts her the most. It's the sound of a man finally realizing his worth and refusing to give it away again. As time moves forward, you begin to realize that silence has become more than just emotional strength. It's turned into a kind of spiritual armor. You see, every time you resisted the urge to explain yourself, every time you chose calm over chaos, you weren't suppressing your emotions, you were mastering them. Silence became your prayer. It taught you patience, discernment, restraint, and self-trust. You started to hear things that words usually drown out. The tone behind people's intentions, the stillness behind their chaos, the truth behind their performance. You began to understand that most people speak to be heard, not to be understood. And when you stop reacting, you learn that clarity doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from observation. That shift turned you from a man who once sought peace through others into a man who creates it from within. And once that kind of peace enters your life, no one can take it away, not even the woman who inspired it. Meanwhile, she's living in a world that now feels slightly out of tune. She'll have fun, laugh, date, maybe even find temporary comfort in new connections, but there's an emptiness beneath it all. Not because she misses you romantically, but because she misses the version of herself that existed when she felt seen by you. She can't replicate it. No matter how much attention she gets, it doesn't feel grounded, it feels artificial. Every compliment she receives feels shallow compared to your quiet appreciation. Every argument she witnesses feels petty compared to your composure. She begins to see what you saw all along, that emotions without direction are chaos, and chaos without consequence destroys connection. She thought silence was weakness until it was the very thing that revealed her own instability. And in that realization, she feels something she never felt before around you: humility. But your silence didn't just change her perception, it exposed society's biggest lie, that reacting makes you powerful. You see now that true strength isn't in expression, it's in control. People mistake loudness for dominance, but the real power is quiet. It's the kind of power that doesn't demand, doesn't beg, doesn't justify. It's the kind that stands still while everything else spins. That's why your silence hurt her so deeply. It wasn't passive, it was absolute. You showed her that attention doesn't equal importance, that validation doesn't equal connection, and that emotion doesn't equal love. You broke every psychological pattern she used to manipulate power dynamics. You became the anomaly, the one she couldn't read, predict, or provoke. And that's why your silence echoes in her mind louder than any argument ever could, because words can be forgotten. But composure, real, masculine composure, haunts forever. You begin to look back now, not with regret, but with gratitude. Every unanswered text, every argument you walked away from, every night you chose peace over proving a point, they all became lessons in self-worth. You start to see that love was never meant to drain you, that emotional chaos was never passion, and that peace doesn't need explanation. You thank her, not with words, but with how quietly you've built your life since she left. The very silence that once felt like loss has now become your foundation. You use it to build your purpose, your focus, your strength. You don't need to announce your growth because it's visible in your presence. That's the final stage of mastery, not proving you've changed, but embodying it so completely that those who once doubted you can feel it in your energy. Your silence has transformed into wisdom, and wisdom doesn't speak, it radiates. For her, that wisdom becomes a mirror she can't look away from. Whenever she sees you again, online, in passing, or even in memory, she feels the distance between who she was and who she could have been. You've become a symbol now, not of heartbreak, but of transformation. She tells herself she let you go, but deep down she knows the truth. You let her go first, long before she ever noticed. And that's why your silence will always carry weight in her heart. Because you didn't destroy her, you dismantled the illusion that she could play with a man's emotions without consequence. You taught her that respect is louder than love, and peace is stronger than passion. She'll never say it, but she learned more from your silence than she ever did from your words. And that's how you win. Not through revenge, not through anger, but through quiet evolution. You became everything she thought she could break. And now, she finally knows she never had the power to. As you move further into your silence, it stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. You begin to notice that peace is addictive. The absence of chaos, the absence of emotional games, the absence of having to constantly prove yourself. It all feels like oxygen after years of breathing smoke. You start to realize that most men never reach this stage because they never survive the noise. They keep explaining, keep defending, keep reacting until they forget who they are. But you didn't. You endured the noise long enough to understand its futility. Now you watch people argue over validation, compete for attention, and chase relationships that exhaust them, and you can't help but feel detached, not from love, but from illusion. You've tasted something better than validation, self-approval. And that's what silence really is. A declaration that you no longer need the world's permission to be at peace with yourself. You start to understand something profound about women too. They don't actually crave your attention. They crave your energy, the calm, the focus, the self-control. It's what they test for. It's what they try to break. When you were reactive, she felt powerful. When you became still, she felt exposed. Because silence reveals who people really are. When you stopped feeding her ego, her insecurity surfaced. When you stopped fighting, her immaturity became visible. And that's why silence is feared, because it uncovers truth. You didn't need to lecture her or prove anything. Your lack of reaction showed her everything. That's the silent paradox of masculine power. The more unshakable you become, the more the world starts reacting to you. And that's when you finally grasp the quiet truth. Being calm in a world that profits from chaos is the ultimate rebellion. Eventually, you start applying that same calmness to every part of your life. You deal with setbacks differently. You face rejection differently. You approach success differently. You don't rush to celebrate, and you don't panic when things fall apart, because you've learned that everything, every emotion, every outcome, every person has a rhythm, and silence is the rhythm of mastery. When something bothers you now, you don't react, you observe, you breathe, you process. You've trained your emotions to follow your logic, not the other way around. You've become grounded in a way that feels unshakable. And here's the irony, you didn't learn this from peace. You learned it from pain. The same heartbreak that once broke you became the pressure that forged you. The woman who silenced you, emotionally, unknowingly, taught you how to use that silence as your greatest weapon. She tried to make you feel small. Instead, she helped you become still. And as for her, she's now living with the echo of that stillness. It follows her into every relationship that lacks your depth. It sits beside her in quiet moments, whispering reminders of the man she thought she could manipulate but never understood. She might act like she's healed, like she's unbothered, but deep down, she knows. She knows that no one else carries the kind of presence that your silence gave. You see, your calm was never passive. It was deeply masculine. It was the energy of a man who could face chaos without needing to control it. That kind of strength can't be faked, and once a woman has felt it, she can't forget it. That's why, even years later, she still feels the pull. Not to rekindle the love, but to understand how a man became everything she thought she wanted without needing her to get there. Now you stand in a different kind of power, one that doesn't need applause, doesn't need recognition, doesn't need validation. The kind of power that simply is. Your silence has turned into presence. You walk differently, speak differently, love differently. You no longer chase what drains you, you attract what aligns with you. And that's the quiet reward of mastering your emotions. Peace becomes magnetic. The same woman who once dismissed your calm now admires it from a distance. The same people who once misunderstood your silence now crave your composure. Because true strength doesn't roar, it resonates. And when a man reaches that level of peace, he doesn't need to prove his worth to anyone, least of all to the woman who once mistook his heart for weakness. You didn't win her back. You didn't even need to. You won something far greater yourself. And once a man wins that, the world bends quietly in his favor.